Hey guys, and welcome to a new series of videos that I'm doing all about resin tips and tricks, as you can see on the paper in front of me. I asked on Instagram a couple of days ago what you guys found difficult about doing resin and what you would like some tips on, or just some advice on how to do them. I do have a series of resin tutorials in my resin tutorial playlist, which I will link in the description, so you can have a look at those if you need some help in making resin charms for the first time. These tips and tricks are mostly for people who know how to do resin and just need a little bit of advice or guidance in doing a certain part of it. So I have a load of things written down here, so I'm probably going to have to split these up into a few different videos. So we'll go and see how many tips and tricks we can do in a video, shall we? So the first thing you guys were asking about is how to mix it properly and how you know when it's fully mixed. So the best advice is to use a clear cup. You can mix in any plastic cup. I used to mix in white cups when I first started, but when I transitioned onto a clear plastic cup like this one, for example, I found my resin pieces were less sticky, they always cured properly, and I never had problems with knowing when resin was mixed, so I definitely recommend a clear cup like this. So these are just like the plastic party cups you get in supermarkets. They have a symbol on the bottom which says PP under it, which means it's made from a polypropylene plastic. Now you might have heard from other resin crafters before that this kind of plastic is great for mixing resin in, because when it is dry or cured, you can simply peel off the resin and it won't stick in the cup, and you can reuse these cups a few times before they start getting like all sticky and crinkly and things like that. When measuring your resin, make sure to measure equal parts. Depending on the resin you use, of course, make sure you follow the instructions. So make sure you know how much you need to measure out for your resin. But for normal standard epoxy resin, which is what I use Easy Cast. It's the only resin I've ever used, so I can't do a comparison video because I know some of you were asking for that as well. But for normal 2-part epoxy resin, you mix it equal parts, so make sure you do that. If you add too much resin into it, it probably won't harden properly. But if you're planning on using a lot of glitter, inks, colorants, pigments to colour the resin, if you're planning on using a lot of it, you can add a tiny bit more hardener to the mix, and that will harden the resin. Basically, it's all in the name. Don't add too much. You want to add a tiny little bit extra, and it sometimes helps to stop your pieces from being bendy or sticky or anything, but to the most part, you want to measure equal parts just to be safe. When mixing your resin, mix for around 10 minutes, even longer if you can, sometimes 15 or 20 minutes. It may sound like a long time, but you need to mix for a long time to get rid of all the strings and things that are in it, to make sure the resin turns clear. When you pour in your resin, start mixing, you will see that strings appear. You will notice the resin becoming cloudy. You need to mix until it is completely clear again. I like to lift my cup up to the light, up to my eye level, so I can see at the bottom of the cup if there's any strings there, if there's any bit of cloudiness, and then I mix it in properly. To mix resin, I just use one of these wooden lollipop sticks. They're just disposable, I just get rid of them. I make sure that the stick drags all the way around, several times around the bottom of the cup, even in the middle part here, just to make sure that you mixed everything, and then around the sides, drag around the sides like that, just to make sure all of the resin is completely mixed in. Don't worry about bubbles when you're mixing your resin. I know bubbles appear when you mix your resin. You get micro bubbles, you get big bubbles, you get all sorts of bubbles, and even if you mix super slow for like an hour, you'll still get bubbles, and it'll also waste an hour of your time. Just mix as quickly as you want. Maybe it's not so quickly that it's spilling everywhere, but you just need to mix like this. That's basically the speed I go at. Some of you may be thinking, oh my god, the bubbles! Honestly, it's fine. It's nearly impossible to get rid of bubbles in resin when you're mixing it in the cup. And I'll explain more about getting rid of bubbles in a bit. But because the volume of resin in the cup will be more than it is in your little mould, it's easier to get rid of bubbles when the resin is in the mould rather than when it's in the cup. Because you can't get rid of the bubbles all over it. You just can't. It's impossible. So don't worry about bubbles when you're mixing your resin. That's just something I've found, and honestly, you can get rid of them so much easier when the resin has been poured out. So now we're on to the topic of bubbles. Like I say, don't try and get rid of them in the mixing cup. Once you've poured it out into your little mold, like I say, use a straw to blow out the bubbles, or you can use a lighter or a heat tool. Now I have a heat tool. This is my heat tool. I bought this from Amazon. It doesn't say the brand, but it has a heart on it there, so I don't know what brand it is. Well, anyway, I don't know what brand it is, but this is the heat tool. It produces a concentrated hot blast of air, and when put over your mold for like a couple of seconds, all the bubbles disappear. It is really quick, but it's also kind of noisy, so I don't do that at night. I've never used a lighter. You can get one of the long lighters to get rid of bubbles. I think you just use it the same way. You just hold it over the resin piece for a couple of seconds and then take it away. You probably want to be careful not to burn yourself when using a lighter, so probably if you're very young you don't want to use that. But a heat tool is fine, just don't point it at yourself because it's very, very hot and you could burn yourself with it as well. But trusty old straw is good. I use the straw most of the time. You just basically blow on the pieces like this until you get rid of all the bubbles. So you want to be checking on your pieces after you've poured out the resin. You blow the bubbles out. When you put the sticker in, blow bubbles out. Just keep on checking your resin pieces just in case any bubbles do appear, so you can get rid of them before your resin does cure. And remember, if you're adding glitter to your resin piece or sparkly things or anything like that, it will hide most of the micro bubbles. In fact, you can't really tell most of my pieces have micro bubbles. If they do, because of the amount of glitter and sparkly things and things I add to the resin to hide it. So for example, if you hold a piece to the side, you can see a few little tiny air bubbles. You only really see this when you hold a piece like this to the side. When you're looking at it head on, you can't see them, like at all. I mean, there might be a little bit of residue on the sticker because I had to tape this sticker, it was a paper sticker. But honestly, can you see any micro bubbles in there? But when you hold it this way, you can see a couple in there. So really, sparkly things are great for helping to hide it. And also, once your piece is done, if you have any large air bubbles on there, you can use rhinestones and bows and things like that to cover them up, as long as the bubbles aren't in a really awkward place. It does happen, sadly. Sometimes pieces do get ruined by a big air bubble that you didn't notice before, especially if it appears underneath the sticker after you've put it in the resin. All I can really suggest for that is when you put your sticker in, just use your popsicle stick, just press it down completely and push any air bubbles to the side, and hopefully that will get rid of any air bubbles that are under there. So I also had a couple of questions about how temperature can affect resin when using it. So I found recently, with the weather being warm, my bedroom's been quite hot, and when I've been doing resin, sometimes the resin does get a bit hot when you touch the bottom of the cup. And it also can become a thicker consistency when you're mixing it and things and when you're pouring it. It's still fine to use. I have had problems where I've tried to mix too much resin at once. For example, my normal resin pours, the resin goes up to about here on the cup. I have tried mixing like this much resin before. Don't do that, because oftentimes the resin will have a reaction and it will start to harden really quickly and it will go really hot, and then you end up with a cup full of hardened resin that you can't use. That's happened to me twice before. I don't know why it does it. All I can assume is because I tried to mix too much resin. So Don't mix too much. When I pour it out, I use these shot glasses and I pour up to the mark on them, the highest mark. If I'm gonna do a big batch, that's the most I ever do at one go. But either way, in warm weather, if you find your resin is a bit hot and a bit of a thicker consistency, it's okay to use, just so long as it doesn't start hardening on you. If it's cold, it can produce more bubbles. To help that, you can warm it up. I usually just warm it up with my hands when mixing it. If your hands are cold, you can put your resin bottles in a tub of warm water just to warm them up a little bit before you pour out your resin. I haven't tried that. I usually just warm it up with my hands, or I put the cup next to my laptop fan, and that actually helps a little bit as well. Or you can put the cup on your radiator, your room heater, whatever. But that's just an option if you think it's cold and it's becoming too bubbly. Just make sure if you do put it in a warm water bath, don't get the water in your resin accidentally. You don't want to have water in your resin because it probably won't work very well. Okay, so my last two topics for this video are going to be about stickers. First one is going to be about dealing with puffy or floaty stickers. So I'm sure if you've done resin before, you've had to deal with stickers that move about a lot when doing resin. So if you have a problem with puffy stickers, wait an hour or two after pouring for the resin to go tacky. I probably just wait an hour and then put the sticker in. The only other thing I can suggest is just look after them, babysit them, check on them every half an hour or every hour, and just keep moving them back in place if they do move out the way. Also, using a thinner layer of resin can help. If you fill your mold up too much, you may find that your stickers will float about a lot more. So don't do too much resin in your mold, do a thinner layer, and then you can pour resin on top later on once it's gone tacky or cured, and it should help the sticker from moving about too much. Now, last topic I'm going to talk about in this tips and tricks video is dealing with paper or paper stickers and sealing them. I have a video on tumbler resin pieces where I seal with tape. I used computer printouts for that, but it's the same thing that applies with stickers. If you're having trouble with the sealing of the stickers with tape, do one sticker at a time. I know in that video I did several at a time on one strip of tape. Just do one at a time until you get the hang of it. When you're cutting the tape around the sticker, leave a 5mm edge around it. Don't try and cut too close to the sticker, otherwise the resin will seep under. And get rid of air bubbles in the tape. I usually just use the back of my scissors here, the handle, and just flatten on the stickers to get rid of any air bubbles that are in the tape, and that will stop it from floating about a lot as well. I know some resin crafters use Mod Podge to seal their stickers. I'm lazy and I don't want to wait for the Mod Podge to dry before using them. I like to just tape them and stick them straight into resin. But I think Crafter's Delights has a good tutorial on how to seal with Mod Podge, so if you'd rather learn how to do that, then I will link her video in the description for you. So that's all for the topics for today's resin tips and tricks. I have a load more topics to talk about. I will leave a list of the topics I'm going to talk about in the description, but if you have any other suggestions which I haven't talked about or I am not going to talk about, then leave suggestions in the comments and I will try and add them to my list of topics. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was kind of helpful for you. I know it's not that interesting, me talking to the camera with a piece of paper with words on, but I'm just trying to give some helpful hints and things on how to make your resin pieces better, and that's all I can really do. So thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!